As I said a few videos back, I buy materials whenever and wherever I see them, and one of the things that I'm often looking for are tray or dish light containers. I've used them for projects like the mini self-watering moss wall and the mini DIY tabletop waterfall. These types of containers are often inexpensive and make for clean looking builds. In fact, I found this one for $6 just the other week. I think it looks great, and when I immediately saw it, I knew it could be perfect for something. Let's get to it. The loose idea I have in mind involves a mountain and waterfall or something of that sort. Now it shouldn't be that difficult to pull off, but I have to make some slight modifications to the container first. You'll notice that there's a lip on the bottom. This is problematic because the weight of stones or other components will cause this to bend and potentially crack. Luckily, that's an easy fix. I cut out a piece of 1/8 inch thick plywood to fill in the void. The thing is though, that if you view it from the sides, it kind of ruins the clean aesthetic of the container. I think it would look more appropriate if we paint the edges black. I'll use some acrylic paint to make that happen. To make things a little bit easier for me, I decided to secure this board to the bottom of the tray with rubber cement. I applied the cement to one side of the board and to the underside of the container. I let it dry on both surfaces and pressed them together. They bonded on contact, and now that this is stabilized, it's ready to be transformed into a piece of art. As I said before, I have a mountain or river sort of idea in mind, and I don't really know exactly what that looks like. So I thought it'd be easiest to come to the Scape Dojo, experiment with some materials, and see what I could come up with. I dropped some gray elephant skin stone into the sandbox and examined the pieces. I had to get a sense of how the materials could fit together. Eventually I found a coherent looking matchup. I felt that I could take it to the next level with some spiderwood as well. So I rearranged the stones to accommodate a few branches. Here's what I came up with. It's still kind of rough, but it gives me a good starting place. That is, unless I go with one of the other scapes. I reset the dojo and got to work with a different combination. This time I'm using black lava rock. Initially I tried to combine them with the spiderwood from the previous concept. I wasn't crazy about what I was seeing though. I wanted something with a little more height. It took a while to find the right combination, but eventually I did. I decided to add some dragon root for textural contrast and interest. As you may recall though, I don't recommend this in large quantities in aquatic environments. That said, it's perfect for something like this. I wove the branches together in an organic fashion and ended up with this concept. At this point, I probably like it a little better than the first, especially because of the height. I think that will really make for a cool design. 3 is the magic number though, so I'll do one more just to be sure. Or at least that was the plan. I worked with various materials from a different set of elephant skin stone to Seiryu stone. However, I didn't have another group of stones that I felt could create the look I imagined. After giving it some thought, I decided to go with the lava rock design. Now although I did like the other one, I think using this is the way to go because of that height that I had. It's just really going to bring my vision together. The thing is though that I need to link them together for stability. I went back and forth on what I should use, and expanding foam seemed like the best option. I would prefer to use black, but this is what I have. I'll hide it later on, so no big deal. To make things easier, I reconstructed the scape in the dojo. I went and applied foam between the contact points to lock it all together. I left it to cure overnight. The rocks are locked together now. I need to remove the excess foam though. That's easy enough by just pulling off the expanded areas. After doing so, I would typically hide these areas with rock dust or something of that nature. Most likely it will be hidden by other elements, so I don't want to bother just yet. I'll also wait to add the driftwood. In the meantime, I'll account for the pump. I want this to be separate from everything else while also being able to pull water from the rest of the design. The easiest way to do that with the materials I have is probably to make a box out of expanded PVC board. I cut out a few small pieces to do exactly that. Super glue is probably the easiest way to bring them together, so that's what I'll use. I just applied a line along the edges and pressed the pieces together. You'll see here that it's slightly taller than the container's edge. That way it can easily build up substrate and other components around it without anything spilling over into the reservoir. That's all good, but water needs to be able to pass through the sides. Easy enough. I used a step drill bit to bore holes along the bottom of this. That creates an issue though. Now I need to add a permeable barrier to protect the pump from particles. I glued pieces of fine window screen over the holes accordingly. As I said before, the pump will rest in the box like so. For it to work as intended, it would probably be best to glue this to the bottom of the container itself. I'm not exactly sure where it should go though, so I'm going to do a test fit of the Scape first. I adjusted the placement a few times to fine tune the look. I ended up with this orientation because I like how it looks, and you also can't see the box behind the Scape. With that taken care of, I pulled the Scape out and glued the box in place. With that taken care of, I was able to put the Scape into the tray for good. I also went on to secure the driftwood. I did my best to create an interesting layout that resembles what I made in the Dojo. It's not an exact copy though. And as you may have expected, I locked them to the stones with super glue. This was easy enough in most areas. You'll see here though that I also used cotton in a few places. Doing so speeds up the process a little bit and makes it easier to attach some of the larger items. Here's the result after all of that. I think it looks pretty cool. What do you think? As much as I want to go and get this thing planted already, I should probably account for this light first. This was an oversight on my end, but I'm too far along now to alter the hardscape. As you can see, if I attach it to the container's edge as intended, it won't be tall enough to light this setup. I need some way of lifting it above everything else. My first idea was to actually attach this to the back of the hardscape. This would seamlessly integrate it and actually be an easy solution. However, my concern is that the light isn't sealed on the bottom here. This could be problematic with the way water will flow through this design. My next and probably better idea is to create a stand of sorts. The challenge here though is that I have to keep it thin so that it remains hidden behind the rocks. I put the tray on a piece of plywood and traced its shape. I painted this black like before so that it matches with everything else. While the paint dried, I screwed two boards together that I'll use to extend the light's height. I accounted for this on the back of the plywood right behind the tray. I used this marking to drill two holes so that I could align everything properly. Then I secured the board with two screws and painted it all black. After that dried, I locked the light in place, slid the tray onto the platform, and turned it on. And after all of that, we're left with this. I think it looks really cool, but there's one more mechanical thing we have to address, the pump. I hooked it up to a length of flex tubing. Then I put it into the box from earlier and got to work securing the tube. I decided to do things differently for this one and went with a conduit clamp. To get it to work though, I had to drill a few holes into the stone. I also put plugs into said holes to give the screw something to thread into. I went back and cut off the excess tubing. As always, I need to give it a test run to see how the water flows. If I did it now, the tube would spray water all over the room, so I placed a piece of geotextile fabric over it to divert the water. The flow was a little wacky, but that's to be expected at first. I adjusted the fabric a little bit to clean things up. I took a few handfuls of dried sphagnum moss and rehydrated it. I'll use it to cover various areas where it will wick and divert the flow of water across the stones. It will also serve as the primary growing medium for the plants. Remember what I said earlier about the exposed foam? Well, I was able to use this to hide all of it. With that taken care of, I'll move to the bottom. I removed all of the water and debris to start. I debated on what I should do with this area down here since it's not really the main focus of the build. I could just leave it open with water and floating plants, but I don't really think that's what I want to do. Instead, I should probably use it as a secondary planting area. The easiest solution to fill in the space, I believe, is a combination of aqua soil and black gravel. I put a thin layer of aqua soil in to start. That way the plants can still get some nutrients. I cap that off with the gravel, which blends better with the rest of the scape. I'll also include smaller pieces of lava rock to fill in more of the foreground. I didn't go overboard with any of the components down in this area because I wanted to retain the space for water. Now that I have the pump running, the appropriate area is covered with sphagnum moss and the bottom filled with substrate, I can finally add the plants. For this build, I really wanted to highlight ferns, and the rabbitfoot fern is a great choice. It will happily grow in damp sphagnum moss and running water. Just make sure to leave the fuzzy rhizomes above the water for optimal results. You'll see here that I already have them cleaned off and down to the roots. That will make the process much easier, starting out at the top of the scape. I moved the moss aside to nestle the roots within. This is quite simple and what I did in various spots throughout. And something that's cool is that as they mature, they'll eventually root onto and into the rock itself. Since lava rock is porous, the roots will be able to make their way in to some extent. As for other plants, I'll keep it light. I have some java moss which I put in a few select locations. Unfortunately, I didn't have much to work with, but it will fill in over time. I also have a few Cryptanthus bivitatus. I planted these within the water area itself, which might not sound viable, but actually works quite well. Naturally, I also have a few vines of Ficus pumila quercifolia. I put these in areas that would benefit from additional texture. I almost didn't do this, but I also included Salvinia minima in the water. It had some duckweed mixed into it as well. There you have it, an alternative way to grow ferns that, if you ask me, looks pretty cool. You might think that it's a lot of work to grow a few plants, but ferns are known to be somewhat temperamental. Anyone who's kept them will likely agree with that sentiment. Believe it or not though, I found that a lot of them, especially rabbit's foot fern, grow particularly well in this type of environment. It seems to take out a lot of the guesswork. Instead, the constant flow of water over the rocks create a self-watering system that allows the ferns to thrive. In addition to that, as I explained earlier, the sphagnum moss helps retain and wick the water beyond the flow itself. The result is something that, believe it or not, is extremely easy to care for. Other than topping it off and occasionally trimming plants, I shouldn't have to do much at all. I want to know what you think though. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. I personally love how it turned out, and I have the perfect spot for it here in the animal room. That's all for now though. As always, I hope you all really enjoyed the project and learned something new. Until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.